Mikee P, Mike Probosi back in the Money Players podcast. Another weekend recap, and the best recapper on this channel is by far Nick Tammaro. So, Nick, welcome back with me. We had some Derby preps over the weekend.
Yeah, we're getting hot and heavy into it, right? Mikee P, 6 weeks now, less than 6 weeks after last week's Louisiana Derby. With the reconfigured schedule each year, it feels like the Louisiana Derby leader in a way becomes kind of the leader in the clubhouse, pun intended. And I remember thinking back to 2022 when Epicenter so impressively won the Louisiana Derby, and we saw the final prep shakeout. And after a few weeks, it was like, you know what? Maybe Epicenter's better than these horses. And it turned out he was for the most part, even though he didn't get the money on Derby Day. So, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how things go the rest of the way. But we're definitely into the final, the championship series of the lead up to the Kentucky Derby, and we're ready for it.
Well, you mentioned Epicenter. Asmussen has another Louisiana Derby champion in Tiz-tastic. $17 he paid, coming from off the pace, beating a pretty game Chunk of Gold, who I certainly was a huge fan of in the race. It certainly lent itself to prices. John Hancock was bet to sub 2-1, and I thought he raced okay, but he was never winning. Bill made his run, and he was another one that took money in the race. What's your assessment? I will say Travis Stone had some interesting thoughts on Twitter this morning, and I was kind of peeking at his thoughts. He said the pace was the sixth fastest in I think the last 20 plus years of this race. When the race was going on, it seemed fast, but that seems a lot faster than I sort of perceived it.
Yeah, well, the caveat to that is that this is a race that's run at a different distance and has now for the last 5 years. So It's not entirely fair to put a half-mile time in a mile and 3/16 race against a mile and an eighth, because there's more straightaway in a mile and 3/16 race, obviously. You know, it was a race where I went through probably 3 iterations of figuring out who was going to win. And there was the early part where you were like, damn it, John Hancock got an easy lead on a good rail. He's going to wire this field, but it'll be great because he'll come back and be overbet in the Derby, and I want no part of him. Well, then Bilt sidled up alongside of him, and the thought that you had was, oh my God, Bilt is going to just trash this field. He looks great at the quarter pole, and he's got time left still. And then they hit the upper stretch. Chunk of Gold started moving, and you thought, okay, this race is kind of falling apart. So I think what it was the proverbial relay race to me, where the baton got passed a couple times, and Tiz-tastic was just simply at the right spot at the right time. He got a phenomenal ride from Joel Rosario. And, you know, really you think back to some of Joel's great Kentucky Derby rides over the years, Practical Joke, Epicenter, you know, times where he knew exactly when to move and got his horses into the money. This was just a terrific ride, saved all kinds of ground, angled outside when he needed to, really sensed that they were going quickly early. And I think that's Joel at his best, is when he can take a horse back, use his instincts, and then really go through some of those tighter spots that maybe some other riders aren't willing to. So I thought it was a good effort from him. He got a 95 buyer. Does he really seem Derby caliber? I mean, I'd ask you this question. If a horse with his running style wins the Derby, wouldn't it be journalism?
Yeah, I think journalism would be favored to win in that scenario, certainly. But he's going to be a lot lower on the board. I'm curious to see how he's bet coming out of this race. I've been on him, it seems like all spring, and then I jump off. And, of course, maybe that was what got him there.
It was the Mikey off angle.
Yeah, and, I mean, I do think that he raced very well. I thought Chunk of Gold, I know you mentioned off air to me, also was just too close. I thought he continues to progress. He probably needs to get faster, but he sort of has a puncher's chance in the Derby, I think.
Yeah, boy, I'm sure Ethan West's phone is going to be ringing off the hook from agents for high-profile riders that are going to look to try and steal this mount from Jareth Loveberry. So it'll be interesting to see if they're loyal to him. I like Jareth. I hope he gets an opportunity. He was a little aggressively ridden. He was probably best on the day. If not, he was a slight second best. The winner did come from a long way back. But again, I think it was a race that was a collapse race all in all. So I don't want to take anything away from Chunk of Gold. I think he ran really, really well. And, to be honest with you, I said on our show on Saturday morning, I'd be perfectly good with him running a really nice third or fourth and giving us a chance to bet him back. I think the problem is the rider that you want for him is the one who won on the winner, right? You want a guy like Rosario who's just going to yank this horse out of the race. And then obviously one of the good things about Chunk of Gold is he's handy and he's versatile. He can go inside. He can get into tight spots. I thought he ran well. And to be honest, if you're looking at him for the Derby, you're looking at him as a 30-1 shot to clunk up for a piece of it. And he's given me no indication at this point that he can't do that.
Yeah, he's a great story also. And the $2,500 they paid for him. I know when I talked to Ethan West, I had an interview with him on the channel, and he mentioned to me, actually off air, that many people were calling about this horse, earlier in the season. The owner just wants to be in the Derby. So I'm not sure that this horse is necessarily. Yeah, definitely going to be there. Do you want anybody else out of this race? I thought Instant Replay, raced pretty well considering his, sort of resume so far. John Hancock, maybe a cutback. There was talk about cutback for him this morning on Twitter. So, I mean, some of these horses are going to be in play the rest of the season, obviously.
Yeah, Bilt and John Hancock both feel like cutback candidates. I would say Pat Daymile looks like a good spot for both of them. I could see them maybe trying to stretch John Hancock back out in some lower tier derbies down the line. He's still a lightly raced horse. This was only career start number 3. He did kind of get the run of the race being on the rail, which would be my problem with him in a major graded stake going 2 turns. So the balance of the field, I don't think I have much regard for. Hypnus needs to find a one other than.
Yeah. Let's jump back on the day. Good Cheer showed up in the Fairground Oaks, did her thing. She was 2-5. She looked every bit of it. I thought Avaha raced well. Quick Kick, I know, was getting a little bit of pub. She sort of just did her thing, made her run, and ended up just an okay 4th. This looks like the favorite for the Oaks.
Yeah, looks like the 3rd year in a row. Brad Cox will have the morning line favorite from Godolphin for this race. And, no reason to argue with it. She was good. She was routinely good. And I think she'll be the horse to beat. I think with the track profile on Saturday, she probably took the worst of it amongst the winners, being 3 wide the whole way and still finished with that same level of interest. I think the difference that you get from that performance is that, I was talking to Travis Stone about this yesterday. I said she kind of glided over the track at Churchill. She always looked to be traveling very comfortably. She was a little more hard used on Saturday. I'm going to attribute that to where she was relative to the rail and think that maybe losing a little ground, maybe being 3 paths off the inside contributed to that. So I thought she ran very well. I think she's clearly the horse to beat in the Oaks, and, barring something unforeseen in the Santa Anita Oaks, we'll see what happens. The Gulfstream Park Oaks on Saturday is an exceptionally weak race. So relative to a horse like Good Cheer, I should say, just horses that aren't running nearly as fast as she is. The fantasy will give us a little insight as well. But yeah, I see Good Cheer at this point going off some price to 5 in the Oaks. I think with the 6-for-6 record, the success at Churchill and the way she ran in these 2 Fairgrounds races, it's going to take a big effort by Tenma or somebody out west to dethrone her as the favorite. Definitely
the one to beat there for the Oaks this year. Well, the champion returned at the Fairgrounds on Saturday, Sierra Leone. Now he was 30 cents on the dollar there to win, but touch upon a star, certainly a classy individual, got the front and just kept on going to win a Hall of Fame. I thought race just okay. I wasn't crazy about the passive ride there. Sierra Leone really never made an impression in the race, and there was a lot of people calling for Chad Brown's head after that.
Yeah, look, it's one of the things that people need to be reminded of at times is these things are not machines, right? They're not going to perform every time. He was off a layoff. You could see this just being a bit of a jumping off point. I mean, this race means absolutely nothing as far as his overall value. It's a grade 2. He's already a multiple grade 1 winner. He's a stallion already. Did they really have to put the screws to him to get the very best of him on Saturday? No. My bigger concern is he just never seemed to be traveling all that great. He was never really picking up the bit. Flavian Pratt was kind of getting after him down the backstretch. So it was a pretty big non-effort. But then I ask you, he got a 103 buyer and was unable to run down a quality loose horse on a good rail. Did he really run that bad? He didn't. He ran poorly relative to the Breeders' Cup Classic. If the Breeders' Cup Classic is the benchmark for him the rest of his career, then he's going to disappoint a lot of people regularly. He has a running style that is not going to be conducive to the majority of dirt races in this country. It's going to take a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic with a big field and a big pace in order for him to bring forth his very best. Now, I will say the most important race on his calendar the rest of the year is his next race, because he needs to prove that this was a fluke. This was a one-off bad performance because of what was going on in front of him, and not that he's taken a step back or hasn't taken a sufficient step forward. So I wouldn't be shocked. And to be honest with you, I'd be a fan of the idea that, they look for spots where there's going to be horses with pace. I mean, maybe, you look at the noms, you see what's going on entry-wise, and if it just doesn't look like it's going to materialize for you, you opt to go elsewhere.
Yeah, or you could start entering rabbits too. I mean, they're not above that necessarily. I mean, if you're looking,
I have no issue with it. I think it's a seldom utilized tool here that, really should be used more. And in fact, we're not going to talk about it, but the Essex on Saturday at Oakland was won by Red Route 1, who had a rabbit. So, I don't know if you were following the game all the way back to a horse called Strike the Gold. Strike the Gold had a rabbit named Loach, who was a sprinter that Nick Zito stretched out, and Loach's job was to make sure that Strike the Gold got some pace to run at. And you know what? There were times where it didn't work. There were times where it helped other horses. So it happens that way, but it does ensure, if you had sent a rabbit out there to quicken up Touch Upon a Star in the opening half mile, I don't know if Sierra Leone would have won, but he certainly would have had better chances.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, though, when you get, and we had talked about this, I know Jackson and I had talked about this on one of the podcasts that we did, but when you have a quality horse like that gets an easy lead, that's capable, that's a very dangerous situation, regardless of the class of the horses behind them, because they have such a pace advantage. And, those situations come up a lot on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't have to just be the Sierra Leones of the world. I mean, there are horses that go down all the time because of paces and things like that. So,
yeah, I mean, look, we, for years and years, and I hate to invoke her name because she's such a lightning rod, but for years and years, one of the reasons why we wanted to see Zenyatta in more dirt route races is because we wanted to just see how good she was. Could she overcome a slow pace routinely on a surface that rewards horses that are forwardly placed? And I think she would have won a lot of meaningful races, even with that style. Well, when you have a style like that, when your profile is to be so far back, it just puts you up against it a lot. And when there's no pace in front of you and there's a quality front runner out there, they're going to get brave. I think if you want to go hero to zero in here, the sort of zero performance was the ride on Hall of Fame, conceding the lead as easily to a Touch Upon a Star as was done. And Jose Ortiz is a world-class rider who had a phenomenal fairgrounds meet. This was not his best effort, and he should have tried to quicken up Touch Upon a Star a little bit more in order to give his horse a better chance to win. I would imagine the next time. Hall of Fame was victimized by winning from off the pace 2 starts back. Now, a lot of times connections start to think, oh, he can rate, we'll be successful doing this. When you have speed, go.
Absolutely. Well, let's switch gears here and go to Turfway Park, where the other Derby prep took place this past weekend, and it was the Jeff Ruby Stakes, another very quick pace early, and the horses that were last and next to last finished 1-2 with Final Gambit winning at 15-1. Nick, do these horses have any chance in Kentucky, or was the setup tailor-made for them?
I mean, I think this would be more like the Jeff Ruby flank stakes, right? It's definitely not a filet mignon or a premium cut. This was a good performance by Final Gambit, who, I mean, you want to talk about the mother of all pace setups, right? This horse got like a 10-horse battle in front of him to wear down late. So it's hard to, Brad Cox is a guy I respect a great deal, and I think he wins at a high percentage for a variety of reasons, one of which is because he knows his horses. And there's a reason why this horse had run exclusively on turf and synthetic so far. I think Brad has a pretty good sense of what his dirt ability is like. And, he's coming in off a maiden win, able to win because of that big pace setup. Luan Machado, who timed it up perfectly. Not something he's always done with alacrity, but he got it done this time around. And I can't possibly see this horse being influential in the Kentucky Derby. And quite honestly, Mikey, I'd be surprised if he runs. I think the connections are going to be pretty realistic. And with it being Judd Mott, they're not they're not too bold as to really force a horse into the race that they don't really think belongs. So we'll see a little bit about what, Brad has to say afterwards in terms of his Derby candidacy. There were some losers out of it for sure. I mean, there were horses that you expected to run a little bit better that really didn't, but it was a wide open race on paper. California Burrito moved a little early. Maybe he's a horse that you could bet back. But again, I mean, are you really making a big bet on him moving forward on dirt?
No, I don't think so. I like Charlie's to blame in the race, but I knew I was in trouble when he was ahead of Innovator for starters, and he just really he had no chance the way the race went. But I'm not sure that maybe just the turf is probably much better for him, and you could see there were horses that made early moves, and there was just no way that they were going to do anything the way the race shaped. I thought Flying Mohawk ran pretty well. I mean, he was obviously outfinished by the winner, but that was a price horse that I do think going forward could be interesting. He seems to be improving. He needs a setup too, but he could be okay.
Yeah, he could. I don't have a big argument against. That was a nice late run, so you want to at least give him his due. Maximum Promise made a nice late bid from off it. I mean, this chart is like the ultimate example of a race totally turned upside down, right? The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 finishers at the pace call were 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12. So, I mean, it's just a total and complete collapse, which you don't get that often. Not to be surprised by it, I would say expectedly, the horses with turf and synthetic form ran particularly well. So I don't, with due respect to California Burrito, he had run okay on dirt in the past. He also seemed to kind of stumble when he got to a patch on the track that it looked like the gate had been over. But he looks like a stretch to get 1.25 miles. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing Brad route Final Gambit and even the runner-up are routed to a race like the American Turf on the Derby undercard. It seems like it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that race is going for $1 million too, so no joke, especially showing up on Derby Day.
First money under the Twin Spires.
Absolutely. So there was an Oaks prep also at Turfway on Saturday, and it was the Bourbonette Oaks, won by Bless the Broken, shipping in from Fairgrounds, and definitely thought this horse had quite a chance. Had raced against horses like Good Cheer, Simply Joking, Muhima. Definitely transitioned to the synthetic track, and another race that came from off the pace to win.
Yeah, exactly. And a filly that, as you alluded to, had faced some of the best of her generation so far. And the 2 horses that came out of the 4-horse Good Cheer, Rachel Alexandra, not named Good Cheer, actually both ran better in their next starts. Both increased their buyer speed figures and goals. The Light did it with a less than ideal trip. So Bless the Broken was first-time synthetic for Will Walden, who continues to really impress as a young trainer that's moving his horses around well. And the funny thing about this horse is that she actually broke her maiden at Evangeline for her prior trainer and was winless for Will, but had definitely run into some heavies, including Simply Joking, Mahima, and Good Cheer, as you brought up. So I think a filly who definitely is destined for the Oaks, obviously has a lot of ground to make up on some of the major players in the division, but this was exactly what they planned, right? Which was an opportunity to get her kind of a backdoor route to the Oaks, and they did it. She got an 82 buyer, so it's not as if, you should be all that down on her. I mean, the horse is running in the Gulfstream Park Oaks that would probably love to get an 82 buyer. I think the second horse, As Catch Can, who was stretching out for Jonathan Thomas, came from deep in the pack with Frankie Dettori on board. It's funny, the 1-2 finishers came from way off of it. Otherwise, the pace held together pretty well. So I almost, in a way, want to upgrade those 1-2 finishers, and I'd be willing to bet As Catch Can back in the Edgewood on Kentucky Oaks Day. I would assume Jonathan Thomas will route her there.
Yeah, that one actually, As Catch Can, she'll be a third back then, and she's sprinted, she's routed, she's turfed, she's synthetic, she has a race on the dirt also, so plenty of versatility for that one. And could be getting better. I mean, could just found the right style for her, maybe the right distance. I mean, I agree. There's a lot to like with that one going forward. Let's jump to a couple of the races from the first tracks over the weekend. Obviously, First sponsors these weekend recaps for us. So we'd like to head to the first tracks. And we're going to go to Santa Anita first for Saturday. And they had the Grade 3 San Luis Rey on the grass. Nick, you definitely liked the winner here. Definitely stuck with Attilian for John Sheriff's Hector Barrios. I thought got a fantastic ride. Gold Phoenix, not so much.
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, I will say, we'll recap the race, and then I'll bring up something that's pertinent to the conversation you and Pete and I had on Saturday morning, where you were right. I'm happy to admit it. But yeah, you know, what Adidlan needed was a rider to just stay quiet and let him produce a final run. And he got some pace in front of him finally. He proved he was sort of bottomless distance-wise, which is what I alluded to Saturday morning, being out of a German mare. That really takes away the concern of being by the factor. You don't really expect a son of the factor to excel at 1.5 miles on turf, but he was able to do so, and he finished up very nicely. It was a well-deserved win for Adidlan, who had been in some pretty tough spots up to it. 97 Beyer speed figure all in all. Second place finisher Devin Propos ran very well, moved a little early, tried to kind of take the race to him around the far turn. Gold Phoenix was caught in a series of really tight spots, and, you know, is kind of this ride was an example of what usually separates the really top tier turf riders from everybody else, which is that when you have a horse with Gold Phoenix's style, you understand that you're going to have to give up some width. And what I mean by that is, you know, you're going to be off the rail. You know, you're going to have to get outside. You've just got to get him in the clear. And he never got in the clear. So I would assume the next time around with Gold Phoenix, with all due respect to Kyle Frey, who I think is a perfectly competent rider, I think we're going to see him with a new jockey and try and find a trip where they get him out into the clear a little bit earlier. I don't want to say he could have been best on the day, but he probably should have been second at the very least. The other thing worth mentioning, of course, is you told Pete and I you didn't think Easter was going to be worth a look whatsoever. And the public actually sent him off to favorite, which I was stunned by. I was paying attention to the race, and then we were running at Sam Houston, so I didn't watch the last couple of minutes. I turned my attention back to it when they were in the middle of the race, and I saw Gold Phoenix's name on the 5 horses on the rundown, and his odds weren't highlighted. And I thought, holy cow, did Easter go off favored? I went and clicked and saw 6-5, and I thought, wow, this is a bad 6-5 shot. And exactly as you predicted, the distance was not his friend. He clearly struggled with the extra ground. If you give Gold Phoenix Easter's trip, they're probably unsaddling him and taking a photo. So it was an underwhelming performance from him. We'll likely see him shorten up.
Well, one more stake at Santa Anita over the weekend, and it was on Sunday. It was the third race, actually, for 3-year-old fillies, the China Doll. Now it's scratched down to 4 horses, and, you know, Baffert scratched the big favorite, Cass Alou. Was even money in the book, but Will then returned finally and dominated, ended up the favorite in there. This, I think, is a pretty nice 3-year-old filly. I know that she's been entered in several spots. They thought about coming to Turfway with this one. I'm not sure who put this horse at 6-1 on the morning line in this race. However, she's very good.
Yeah, she's really good. Jonathan Thomas, incidentally, nominated her to a 3-year-old colt stake that we ran at Sam Houston back in January when he was thinking about running Truly Quality down here. So I know he's held her in high esteem for a while. She's really solid. You want to talk about a trip where a jockey knows from the first jump out of the gate he's going to win. Watch Umberto Rispoli on this horse, right? He's got her in a perfect spot sitting off the pace. He even let the eventual third place finisher come up to him on the turn before he unleashed her down the stretch, and she kicked away very easily. So he basically said afterwards he had to just point her in the right direction. There wasn't much work that went into it. So I would assume that if Jonathan potentially runs as Catch Ken in the Edgewood, she might see this filly in there with her. There's really no reason for her to stay out west. Maybe eventually come back for the Del Mar Oaks, but there are some races that lead up to it, but there isn't a grade 1 at Santa Anita in the summer like there used to be. So I think we'll see her probably travel back east. I don't know where Jonathan Thomas's barn is going year round. He's been in California now for about 5 months. But all in all, this was a good performance. And obviously things got easier when Casalou scratched. We'll see where Bob Baffert surfaces next with her, but a worthy win for Will then, who looked very good doing so.
A couple turf stakes over the weekend. At Gulfstream on Saturday, they raced the Texas Glitter, and we got a price here. Encanado was the winner from off the pace, almost 10-1. There were a couple horses bet in there. No Evidence ended up the favorite, which was a little surprising given some of the others that entered in the race. But another off the pace winner for a 5-furlong race at Gulfstream. That seems to be happening a little more lately, Nick.
Yeah, you know, I have this theory, and I've not tested it out with any kind of numbers, but when the rail is on the inside, I think off the pace is okay sprinting. I feel like the pace runners do better with the wider rail. So this was with the rail at, I don't know if it was 0, but it was close to it. And it definitely had an off the pace type flow to it. Yeah, we kind of talked about this race Saturday morning, and we were wondering about how the wagering would go, and assumed that Gabaldon would be the favorite coming back off the Royal Ascot trip. He ended up the second choice. He got a pretty easy lead, and he capitulated very timidly down the stretch. He didn't really put up much of a fight. No Evidence ran right by him, and then Encanto picked up the baton at the 8th pole and ran on with it. He is a stablemate of Gabaldon. And so that was my problem handicapping the race. I thought, I really could take an off the pace horse here, but why would D'Angelo run this horse against his big horse? And it turned out that should have been the angle. That was what worked out best, as he came from deep in the pack to get it done, and looks like a horse that will certainly have some big opportunities down the line, as the 3-year-old turf sprint division now includes a Grade 1 at Kentucky Downs a little later in the year.
Well, another turf stakes on Sunday, and another 5 furlong race going for, it was a listed stake going for 115,000. And the winner here was a horse named Chloe, who had broke the maiden at Gulfstream over the synthetic back in January. Was able to get the front in this race and dominate. I thought she looked very good, especially really never looked a loser, Nick, on the front end. Some of the ones chasing her are actually pretty decent. I think the Me Governor, the Make Haste came back. That's a horse that was racing over in England for Clement. I mean, I thought that there were some runners in this race, but she actually made it look pretty easy.
Yeah, she ran well. Was definitely bet to the type of performance she put forth. And so I'm not shocked by that. She was a horse I was looking at when I was looking at this race. And I noticed that her second dam was a filly named Habibti, who was a Grade 1 winner at 2 for Bob Baffert, and harkened back to some of the older days. A daughter of Tabasco Cat, who won the Hollywood Starlet. She had produced a series of decent horses, none of which were really turf horses. And that was what made me a little worried. But this was a new arrival to the Jose D'Angelo barn, who swept the stakes over the weekend at Gulfstream, and did so nicely on the front end. So no surprise that Chloe was able to put forth that kind of effort. It was probably a little bit of an expected performance from Me Governor. Ran fine all in all. I had picked Abby in tow in this race, and she scratched. And so she didn't participate. We'll see where she goes next. But all in all, no arguing with Chloe, and that good early speed. Luis Saez on the turf on the front end, very tough.
A little bit of a slow week at Gulfstream, but business is about to pick up because we got the Florida Derby approaching for this weekend, Nick. I know we're going to have plenty of coverage on the network, and Pete and I did a video earlier today covering that on the YouTube channel. You can check that out. But any early thoughts for that Florida Derby this week?
I'll be honest, Mikey, I'll be very surprised if Sovereignty loses that race. I thought he really ran well in the comeback race in the Fountain of Youth. Never really looked like he was going to get there, and all of a sudden just hit this extra gear in the final 16th or so. There's a lot of speed in there. It should really set up well. It's unfortunate he drew the 10, but 3 or 4 of the horses in there don't look all that competitive, and there's a lot of speed. So he should have an opportunity to get over and save some ground. I'm obviously intrigued to see how Disruptor runs on the class jump. I think this is a little bit more than he can handle. Worth noting, too, off of maiden wins in graded stake dirt routes for 3-year-olds and up, Todd Pletcher's over his last 24. And that's the move that's being made with Disruptor. So I think he's going to have to really elevate his game. I'm intrigued by Tappan Street. I want to see how he performs third time out. I'm glad Brad's giving him one more opportunity to get to the big race. So fun field all in all. I'm definitely looking forward to Sovereignty, though.
Absolutely. It's going to be a big week at Gulfstream. We look forward to a lot of your coverage on the network. Well, Nick, this has been fun. We got through another weekend recap and plenty of Derby preps to go. But like you said, we're getting close. It should be fun.
We're hot and heavy, ready for it.
Well, there's been a production of In the Money Media. If you're listening on the audio side, stick with us. If you're watching on YouTube, check out some of the other videos. We'll see you guys next time.